Good morning and welcome to the Bulwark podcast. I'm Charlie Sykes. Somehow I've managed to rent space in Ted Cruz's head. I'm not sure that's where I want to be. Price is right. It's completely free. We've been going back and forth about critical race theory. It is interesting. One of the things that happens on Twitter, I think, is that sometimes when people go the wrong direction, instead of backing up and saying, "Hey, I really made a serious mistake here. I apologize for that," they keep digging. Tim Miller joins me live. You know what I'm talking about, Tim?
People who keep digging themselves into holes on Twitter. Tim Miller is with me today.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, Tim Miller, who is an expert. I mean, you're a student of the genre, and particularly now with social media. I mean, you fire something off, and it turns out that it's really stupid. It sounded good in your head. It's really dumb, but of course, you can never apologize. You can never back off. You have to double down. So.
Yeah, I guess I'm a student of this, but what was the origin of this? Was this true of Twitter in 2014, or was this also related to our crazified politics? I'm not sure. I do think that it has gotten worse, and I do think that Trump has sent a signal to everybody that never apologize, never surrender is the way to go.
It's contact lunacy, since I'm doubling down on that.
I was just glancing through your contact lunacy this morning. I haven't had a chance to listen to Eric Edelman's yesterday. I didn't have dental surgery, so I don't really have a good excuse. I was curious how your molars are doing.
Oh man, this was hard. I have to tell you, I don't want to complain about it. But there's the term tooth abscess does not capture exactly how bad it is. Now again, I acknowledging that, and an abscess. An abscess is not the same as childbirth, and I'm not trying to compare it, but it's up there. And I had not the greatest weekend in the world. Let me just put it that way.
So, how do you get an abscess? Just so I can try to avoid it as I enter middle age.
Dental neglect through the pandemic. This was one of the things, living on borrowed time for a long time. Hey, you better get that taken care of. Certainly, he said a year and a half ago.
Time for me to get an appointment. I hope everybody else will do that with you. I guess maybe this is going to be TMI, but the dentist was the one thing that I just couldn't do during the pandemic. I was like, it's just, they would call me and say, you need to come in, and we've done all the procedures. But I'm like, I just don't see how this could possibly be safe.
No, I mean, it is like a semi-trailer truck had an accident in my head, in my mouth, and I'm actually feeling better, but I don't know. I think your brain gets sort of pain memory at a certain point where it's like, this was really, really bad. So any little twinge that is not really bad, and there's nothing really, really wrong, but it all fires up like, okay, guys, we have to fire up all the nerve endings. So can I talk about Ted Cruz briefly?
Please, let's do it.
So Ted Cruz, I had a piece yesterday about, banning critical race theory from schools. Here's an indication of how lazy our debate is, that when you say, okay, critical race theory is a bad idea and we ought to debate it, but we shouldn't have legislators who don't know what they're talking about passing bills banning it from our schools, people go, well, you must be for critical race theory, right? So Ted Cruz actually decided to come after me after my newsletter yesterday, and he accused me of Trump derangement syndrome. He said Sykes, who used to be a conservative because they don't want government dictating these things and banning speech, whatever, is now defending critical race theory, which isn't true. He proffers a series of straw men, e.g., don't ban it. And then Ted Cruz, United States Senator from the state of Texas, writes, nobody is banning it, but we don't have to allow schools to teach our kids to hate each other based on race. So we're not banning it. We're just not allowing it. And so I said, hey, Ted, nobody is banning it. Florida to Ted, hold my beer. When I, tweeted out the headline, Florida bans critical race theory from its classrooms. Wisconsin congressman introduces bill to ban critical race theory in D.C. schools. At least 5 Republican state legislatures have passed bans on critical race theory. So, Ted, that's where the word, ban comes from. Ted Cruz can't stop, won't stop. So he tweets out this morning. Okay, Charlie, let's try some critical reading. Yes, the headline uses the word ban. You got me. But, hey, I threw that in. But the very next words are from the classroom. Oh, get it? See, we're not banning it. We're just banning it from the classroom. Therefore, we're not banning it. People can read and advocate CRT and other racist ideologies all they want. Florida just won't have public school teachers actively teaching children to hate. To which I responded, Ted, just stop owning yourself here. It's just like, can we just have a debate about it? It's a look, critical race theory is reductionist. It can be bullying. It can be, there's all kinds of, I think, problems with critical race theory, as there are with critical theory, critical social theory, all sorts of radical academic ideologies. But look, this is obviously just a cynical partisan ploy that Republicans are using. It's the 2022 version of the race card, and just own up to it. So this whole Ted Cruz, no one's banning it. Okay, well, I didn't mean banning it in that sense of the word. I'm a Harvard Law School graduate, so the word ban means
Harvard debate team. Even I think you're what's happening right now, Charlie. Is you're a victim of the Harvard debate team skill. You're just seeing it and you're just seeing it live right now, where you can sort of nitpick each word and what's the meaning of is. Yeah, look, I'm intrigued by two things. One is his last comment there about how we're just banning teachers from teaching kids to hate. I'm intrigued by the fact that Ted Cruz is for that. I'm interested that this is the first time that has come up as an issue. That never has come up about, I don't know, banning teachers who want to be critical of gays. How about banning Catholic school teachers who want to say that the gay lifestyle is wrong? Do you think Ted Cruz would be for that, or banning teachers who want to attack the Chinese culture? Do you think that would be something that Ted would be for right now? I mean, the whole thing is just preposterous, and it is reminiscent to me of when you talk about who changed and whether it's the old TDS dental emergency addled Charlie Sykes that has changed, or whether it's Ted Cruz. I do think back to that primary I was in against him in 2015, and the thing that he was so upset with Jeb about, was the Common Core curriculum. You remember this debate? The Common Core curriculum.
I lived this.
If the government was going to tell the local schools and classrooms what and how they could teach, and Jeb would say, well, we're just trying to create minimum standards so kids know their multiplication tables by a certain grade, etc. And so, no, that isn't acceptable. That's big government getting in the way of what's happening in the classroom. And all of a sudden, over the last year, it's like patriotic Common Core has come into vogue for Ted Cruz. We have to teach the 1776 project, not the 1619 project. We cannot teach critical race theory. The history teachers have to abide by certain explanations about what happened in America's great founding. It is interesting, the change of tune in that regard that sort of undermines his whole claim, that he's been the consistent one. And by the way, I'm not. Who cares who's been consistent, right? I'm okay with
you can change
their
your
minds on stuff, but it's this obsession that happens with the Cruz types of trying to say it's you with the TDS who has, and I don't really see the through line between the Common Core controversy when it came to multiplication tables and banning critical race theory and the 1619 project.
Well, also, up until 5 minutes ago, people on the right were embracing the free speech movement. It's all about protecting free speech in academia. You go on any of these websites, it's all about they're trying to shut you down. And then on the other hand, let's have the state legislature, from, the, Arkansas state legislature with state senator, whatever from, lower BF Arkansas, drafting legislation saying what can and can't be taught. Look, as I believe it's come up on this podcast before, Tim, that I am slightly older than you. I actually posted a picture of something I wrote more than 30 years ago. I have been writing about critical theory for 30 years ago. and talking about the attack on the Enlightenment values, the attack on liberalism, the hectoring attacks on science, all of which I think are target-rich environments. But it's interesting. So for 30 years, we have been debating this, and I don't recall until 5 minutes ago that conservative Republicans wanted state legislatures to dictate what ideas are not permitted in the in the classroom, theories, ideas, concepts. And what I wrote yesterday that apparently got, Ted Cruz all worked up was, okay, if you're really concerned about what's being taught in the classroom and you are banning things from the classroom, why not ban other things? Why not ban critical theory itself, critical legal theory? Why not ban radical feminism, post-structuralism, intersectionality? How about banning all the things you don't like if you want to get started? His argument, of course, is that critical race theory is derived from Marxism, and therefore that's why we need to ban it from the classroom. Well, Ted, why stop there? Why not ban Marxism from the classroom? Or does that basically just rip off your fascist mask, your anti-free speech mask, if you're banning all these things you disagree with?
Yeah, I think, and it's funny. It was something I was thinking about the other day, Charlie. Is that this is really and Fox and the conservative ecosystem is really good at this on the cultural side of things, just like tapping into something that touches a cultural nerve, and this is an example of a complaint as old as time. I mean, really, once you strip away all the artifice and all the BS, all this is my kid's social studies teacher is too liberal. My kid's social studies teacher is too woke, and I'm upset about what they're being taught. And this is a complaint that every parent, who is politically active has had going back to when the schoolhouse opened. Obviously, the left often complained about history classes being too rah-rah America. This was the whole Howard Zinn push. We need to teach more, Howard Zinn in the classrooms. I think that rightly, a lot of communities are like, we need to inject more people of color and more voices from women and from Black Americans into the curriculum. I mean, people complain about the curriculum all the time. This was the whole point of the conservative mindset about this, was that it should be under local control. This was the whole debate over Common Core, right? So, this is not some kind of, this is a, virus that has just infected the schools in the last 5 minutes and we need to take care of it now. It's the same complaint, just put under different auspices and under one let's just be honest, let them play the race card, at a time when kind of Donald Trump has unleashed the Pandora's box, where it's much, much more allowed to play the race card just overtly than maybe it was, 10 years ago.
I also think it's the intellectual dishonesty that they're really not talking about critical race theory. This is why this guy, Christopher Rufo, is such a phony charlatan. He basically is admitting, I want everything that people don't like, anything that annoys them or offends them or makes them uncomfortable about race. I want them to think it's critical race theory. So you just basically have decided that you're going after potentially any discussion about race or injustice or police violence or any of those things can be brushed off. Now, there are some things out there that are just nuts, that are stupid, that are insulting, that are offensive, that are counterproductive.
Can I just chime in on this point, though? Yeah, please, I mean, the one thing that is, alarming, and I do think that it's important for folks on the left to deal with this. Honestly, there are a lot of folks who are doing that. Is some of these anti-racism trainings are a little cuckoo, and when I see several, not just one report, but several reports of different schools holding like all whites meetings where it's like the white parents come in to get debathification training, and it's like, I don't know if segregating the parents of the students, I don't know if resegregating people is the right answer here. So, well, there is a lot of good stuff happening, and I think that on balance, the being more mindful of making sure, diverse voices are in the classroom and that the curriculum is, representing more points of view. And all. I think all that is great. Some of this stuff is a little bit kooky. And like you're saying, and that is where this gets frustrating because, we get forced into our, sort of tribal fights of yes or no, because the Christopher Rufo assholes of the world want to make everything into critical race.
Yeah. Okay. I want to move on because we have a lot of other things I want to talk about, including the New York City mayoral primary, which is today, which will, of course, be tremendously overanalyzed, and I'm completely there for that. And I know that you've done some things on it, but since we're on critical race, giving you a sense of how folks on the right are whipping themselves up into this absolute hysteria about anything about race. And here's is this from Newsmax? I think, Michael Savage, long time on air bigot, is really, really worked up about this. Here's Michael Savage.
Because that's the only way to stop this. These children are being humiliated and hurt and damaged for life by a psychotic woman who came up with this lie called critical race theory, which is nothing but racism towards white people. No other race is targeted. I could go on, and I could go on and on. I've studied history. I know where this starts. I know where it ends. It started in the same kind of thing started in Germany. The Jews were no good. The Jews did this. The Jews did that. Yep. The next thing you knew, they were being excluded from swimming pools. They didn't put them in concentration camps overnight. I studied this intimately. I am Jewish. I know how this starts. Attacks on white people is exactly what was done to the Jews in Germany in the 30s. Exactly. Don't fall for this garbage. This is the road to the death camps. Stand up to these bastards and sue them.
Okay, so there's what is the phrase? The first person that mentions Hitler loses the debate. But it's like everything now this is exactly what they did. Everything is not. Everything I dislike is Hitler. Everything I dislike is now critical race theory, which is the same as Hitler. And so,
what is he referencing? Or what whites are being banned from pools now? I hadn't heard that. Is that something that's happening in his San Francisco neighborhood, where is there a local pool that's banning whites?
Look, my head would explode if I had to sit through one of these retraining sessions where you had this video about white fragility and everything like that, or whatever. Or if I had to sit and listen to somebody, say that all white people are psychotics, my head would explode. But you know what I wouldn't be thinking? I wouldn't be thinking they're about to round me up and put me on the cars to send me to the death camps. Okay, New York City mayor's election is today. We won't know necessarily who won because they have ranked choice voting. Now, this is going to be analyzed to death because it does appear, or likely, at least as of right now, that a non-progressive candidate is in the lead. And I think it's safe to say that if progressives can't win in New York City, that's kind of a tell. Do you agree or disagree there?
Well, I guess it depends on what the tell is, right? I mean, obviously you can overanalyze things. I think that it's really fair to say that if Adams wins, as the polls show now, I guess just to set the scene for people who haven't paid attention, the New York mayor's race is not drawing in the big numbers. I just have to say I did my Not My Party on it last week, and it was not our top most viewed episode. So not everybody is as nerdy as us who wants to analyze these municipal elections, but that's a mistake, everybody, because it's been a hilarious race. There have been the best gaffes. But the guy in the front runner is Eric Adams, who is the Brooklyn Borough president, former cop, really weird dude. Just yesterday I was asked what his favorite concert ever was, and he said it was the time that he went to a concert in Curtis Mayfield, had a light fall on him, and got paralyzed.
Awkward.
Awkward guy. Actually lives in New Jersey, it seems like, was pretending to live at his son's apartment in New York. But the thing that he's had going for him is during this increase in the crime surge, he's been the one candidate in the race that has really kind of run as more of an old school law and order, moderate Democrat, kind of a machine Democrat with the police unions, etc. Now you've also got Yang, who is kind of a heterodox Democrat, not a down the line progressive liberal, and then you've got this Catherine Garcia, who's sort of like a Joe Biden-ish Democrat, who also said she's against defund the police. So you have these three who are against defund the police, and then you have, Maya Wiley is sort of the progressive, kind of playing the Elizabeth Warren sort of role ish in the primary, and then you have, Morales, who's kind of the Bernie candidate, whose campaign has imploded in hilarious fashion when her staff tried to unionize. So Adams, as the most moderate and the most, I would say, anti-defund movement, being in the lead, despite his weirdness, if he holds on to win, I think that does say something about the viability of defund the police. And I think that it does say something about the fact that, the Democrats' overstep on this last year is even reflected among their own ranks, right? Not just swing voters. And so I think that is interesting. I also just think, broadly speaking, there was a notion probably about 18 months ago, and you and I would get this a lot from right-wing commentators, that the Democrats are going down the same path the Republicans have gone. The Democrats are going crazy. They're going socialist. It's going to be DSA, AOC, Bernie is the future of their party. And, it's going to be nationalism against socialism. And it's just, maybe that's going to happen, but there just continues to be not a lot of evidence for it, right? Joe Biden wins, Terry McAuliffe wins in a landslide in the Virginia primary, and now you go to New York, AOC's home. She endorsed Wiley. Wiley could still win, but if she doesn't, it's just another strike against the Democrats. Now, there are a lot of ins and outs and what have yous, and all this. You can overanalyze one thing, but I think so. A strike not against the Democrats, but a strike against the notion that the progressive DSA wing of the Democrats is taking over the party. And it seems to me that there is a much stronger base of center-left voters in the Democratic primary than there were, Jebby Rhino cucks like me in the Republican primary.
I think it's going to be a very, very powerful data point. Now, the reason we will not know who won tonight and why there's still a big question mark over the election, even though Eric Adams appears to be the front runner, is they have ranked choice voting. Now, this is one of the hot new ideas. One of the arguments was this would lower the temperature of our politics. Clearly not happening in New York. But
literally, Yang and Adams yesterday are calling each other lying scum.
Lying scum. So that didn't solve that. So Tim Miller, explain as clearly as you can ranked choice voting.
Are you ready? Sarah Longwell says that she has to roll her eyes every time ranked in every one of these centrist confabs that we get invited to. There's always the ranked choice voting guy there.
I have been there. I know exactly what she means.
And I'm kind of neutral on it. But here is to explain how it will happen. So let's say that there are 8 candidates. I forget how many there are in New York. You have the first round of voting. If nobody gets 50%, you take the 8th candidate and you drop them off, kind of like in soccer in Britain, right, where you get relegated. Okay, so if the 8th candidate had 3% of the vote, the people that voted for that 8th candidate then made a second choice. Those people's second choice then gets filtered up to whoever it was at the top. Now, if you have somebody who gets to 50%, then you have a winner. Okay, then you go to the next round, which is the 7th ranked person. Their votes now get filtered up to their second choice, and then the 6th, and then the 5th, and then the 4th. Now, if you had the 8th place person on your ballot, and then the 7th place person, if you like losers, then after the second round, your 3rd choice on your ranked choice gets filtered up to the other candidates. And so eventually...
Oh, wow, that is complicated.
Yeah, so eventually what happens is when you get down to the final... if nobody gets to 50% when you're down to 3, the 3rd place candidates' numbers matriculate up to the 1st or 2nd, and then you have your winner in the final round. So it is complicated. I don't understand really why it's going to take 4 weeks. I mean, we do have powerful computers in the year of our Lord 2021.
Apparently not in New York.
The NBA All-Star game is able to count their votes online pretty quickly. They've met many more votes than are in New York. And New York is always, this is something that I think people don't realize. Yeah, they're always slow, right? Even when they have regular voting, it always counts very slowly. I did have a reader complained to me about making fun of this and said, it's more important you get it right than the speed. And I guess just respectfully, I just disagree with that. I just think that, information vacuums are not good. I'm not suggesting that what will happen in New York will be the same as ahead of January 6th, but I do not think that it helped our interregnum after Trump. The fact that it took 4 days for the networks to call an election that was pretty clearly done on Wednesday after November 6th. So, it's something that they should fix. But yeah, that's the deal with ranked choice.
Ranked choice. But what is the point? What is the argument in favor of ranked choice voting as opposed to you go in the voting booth and you vote for the candidate you want? And this gives you obviously multiple choices and requires you to think about politics in a different way. So what is the argument for why this is better than, one person, one vote, one candidate?
Yeah. I'm sure that if we had ranked choice guy on, he could make a more compelling case for it than I'm about to right now. But the one factor that is, on the list of arguments that people make for ranked choice voting is that if you have a, sort of outlandish candidate that maybe could attract 30% of the vote, in a big field, that they then cannot win a plurality support, right? That in theory, that ranked choice voting would create more of a consensus candidate winning.
Weans out the crazy.
I guess, but is that really true? I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure, right? So if you put that into a bunch of congressional races, aren't the craziest candidates the Marjorie Taylor Greenes and the Steve Kings? He's not there anymore, but the Madison Cawthorns. I mean, in these districts, are they really? I think that they want the crazy. I think they're giving the people what they want. So I don't know that ranked choice would really change much there. But yeah, I mean, I think that is the theory is that hopefully it would, I think, get rid of some of these candidates who are out on the fringes who can win with plurality support. I'm sure there are other reasons that someone could put on their pocket protector and explain to us, and I'm sure we'll get some emails about this. But that's the main one.
I would, if I had to vote on ranked choice voting, I would say yes, let's try this. I am open to this idea. I'm open to anything that is going to change the kind of binary world that we live in right now. However, I can also see the danger, and we'll see it play out here in New York. So, for example, if tonight Eric Adams, who's African-American, if he's ahead, and let's say he's ahead substantially, but as the ranked choice voting plays out over the next couple of weeks, it turns out that he loses. He is certainly already primed to say that this is wrong. This is fraudulent. He might sue. He's going to say that there is a voter suppression. You can imagine this playing out on a larger scale where, because people don't fully understand it and because the results can change, that people would actually, have less faith in this. Do you understand what I'm saying? I mean, there's more reason to get confused. Like, how'd that happen? How did he have 40% on election day and he's 10 points ahead of everybody else, and then he's not the mayor? How does that work?
I do, yeah. I'm a proportional. Like my preferred reform of choice is proportional representation, because I think it'd be, we'd get at least a handful of sort of rhino cucks in there in Congress that way. Every sort of group would have their little, a few members to represent their points of view. Yeah, their little faction. Now that also has its own problems. Obviously, you look at the factional parties in Europe, and what you see in various countries where the nationalists have risen up, or the socialists. So look, there's no foolproof answer here, right? Like the problem is us, and the people we're voting for are like, we're the problem in the solution. And Louisiana and California both have the top two system. A couple other states do too, where they've eliminated kind of primaries. You just have the jungle primary, and the theory of that case being the same, right? That that would prevent the more radical candidates necessarily from winning. And that hasn't really borne itself out, to be particularly, to yield different results really than just the traditional voting system would. So and I agree with that. I think that there's if you lose if you win the first ballot and then go on to lose, depending on how irresponsible the first person is and depending on who the second and third are, absolutely there could be folks that have legitimate grievance about that. And like, has the New York electorate really been educated about this and brought on board to avoid a radical pushback? It's hard to really believe that that's true.
Well, see, you and I are political geeks, and this still makes our heads hurt. So I just wonder what the casual voter is going to go. Okay, let's talk about Tucker. I want to get to the NCAA decision. I know, because I know you have strong feelings on it. This Tucker Carlson story yesterday, for people who haven't seen it, Ben Smith in the New York Times, detailed story about the fact that Tucker Carlson, who spends much of his time attacking, the scum in the media and how dishonest they are, actually is one of the biggest leakers out there. And by that, I mean that he is a source of gossip for reporters. So he's on the phone, he's texting them. He is a go-to guy for anecdotes about Trump and Trump world and everything. So he's been playing this very complicated double game where he's ripping and attacking the media and making himself look to the audience like he is the biggest, anti-media guy in the world. He's whispering in their ears on a regular basis. It's apparently a not well-kept secret in Washington, New York circles that he is, on speed dial with many of these reporters. And as Ben Smith makes clear, it's also one of the reasons why perhaps many people in the media have gone soft on him, have not gone after him the way they have other people on the right, because he's their guy. Now, look, you've been on multiple sides of all of this. This is not new, that there are people who protect themselves from the media using the adage, a dog with a bone in his mouth won't bite you. And if you read the tea leaves really carefully, you see who's being treated with kid gloves and who's being hammered. And the person who's being treated with kid gloves might be a source for the media. So I'm not sure who comes off worse in this story. Tucker Carlson for his hypocrisy in playing the media game and talking to all these people, or the media for playing footsie with this guy who has been peddling one lie, one bit of bullshit after another, and yet not going after him as aggressively because they use him on an off-the-record basis or a confidential basis. So what are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I think the media comes off worse. I mean, this is not a unique Tucker thing, right? I mean, Steve Bannon was the king of this, right? And there's the classic HBO video. One of my claims to fame is when Steve Bannon is like in the background of the New York Times documentary, trash talking me to some other New York Times reporter behind the scenes. Yeah, I get a call from somebody who's like, you have to go to the 32-minute mark. I think Steve Bannon is trying to finger you for the he had a conspiracy theory that I was behind the Roy Moore accusers in 2017. It was a sort of
weird, Tim?
I had one conversation with one of them as a media training type situation, and so Steve then thought that I was like, yes, I was traveling around Alabama finding all four of these women who 40 years ago were molested by Roy Moore. I had other things to do.
Thank you for doing that, even if you didn't do it.
Exactly. So anyway, Bannon was a king of this. Bannon on the cover of Time. Trump himself is the king of this, and also was working reporters very much behind the scenes. All of these guys, they're junkies too. They're just like us. They like the rush. They like the game. They like to consider themselves Bengalis. And here's the thing: I was more sympathetic to the media in this at the beginning of the Trump era, right? Because there was this notion of you got to build sources. We need to know what's happening, right? And there's always this balance in these judgment calls, right? Like you have to deal with these people like they're running the government, right? You can't just, there's some people who rail against all types of access journalism, and I understand their complaints, but at the same time, it's like, well, when wannabe Nazis are one in the government, you got to deal with wannabe Nazis, right? And so, so that includes Stephen Miller, I guess, right? Here's what bugged me about it growing over time, though, and that is that, and David Frum really hit on this very well in The Atlantic. I recommend you read his article if you haven't yesterday.
Excellent.
And it's like, yeah, Tucker's a liar.
Yeah.
Right. And so, there was this one example of the story where Tucker said that people came to his house and banged on his door, and which seemed to be not really true. And there's a very sympathetic mainstream media coverage of him. There's a coverage of him going down to Mar-a-Lago to shake Donald Trump, to wag his finger at Donald Trump and tell him to take the coronavirus seriously. And then a couple weeks later, it was Tucker that was saying it was a hoax. There are all these examples, and I got frustrated with the folks that were playing the access game, who would do the thing where they would take a report from somebody on background, like a Tucker, or like a Kellyanne Conway, like a Bannon, and then Tucker himself or Donald Trump himself or Kellyanne would then go out and say, this is fake news. This isn't true. They're using anonymous sources. This is fake news. And then the reporters just sat there and took it. Yep. Right. And they're being played by a fiddle by these people who are calling them enemies of the people, saying it's fake news. And you just have to know there were instances where Tucker and Kellyanne and Trump were calling things fake news that they were the sources for. Right. And when that happens, when there are these instances where they give you a piece of information and then it turns out to be a lie, or then they publicly say it is untrue, I think that is a break of the off the record agreement, right? And I think that reporters needed to, over the last 5 years, adjust the way that they dealt with off the record. When they were dealing with me and I was giving them off the record stuff on Jeb, I never told them the sky is green, and then they reported that, and then I'd said, no, they're stupid, the sky is blue. Right. Like, I would spin. I'd try to put the best picture on what we were doing, obviously. But to give a reporter a piece of information, then have them report it and then go out and say, no, that's false. They're fake news. They're liars. That was new. That was something that was new. And the reporters never adjusted to it. And I think that is true with Tucker, too, obviously, just as it is with Trump. He plays that same game.
No, I agree, and I've thought over the last 4 years that a lot of what's happened has been to break the model of journalism. That journalism had these certain rules. We did these things and not these things, and then when you're confronted with people like Donald Trump, or as we're talking about here, Tucker Carlson, it just shatters all those norms. I used to obviously have sources that I talk to on a regular basis, but I had the standard that you're describing. That if somebody told me something that turned out to be a flat out lie, we were done. I mean, we were just done. I wouldn't have them. I wouldn't talk to them again. I wouldn't trust them again. It was, and it happened a few times. With pretty dire consequences, probably for both of us. But the Tucker thing. One of the I have to say that sitting here in Wisconsin, there are many disadvantages not being in the loop, but there are advantages that I don't have to hang with these people and I don't have to worry about that. I remember I was, writing something or saying something about a prominent media person, and I got a lot of pushback. Oh, this person's a good person. This person's a nice guy. I'm thinking, screw that. I don't know this person. He's not a fellow parent on the soccer team or something. Right. I don't go to recitals with him. I haven't been to a cocktail party with him. He's obviously, a creep and a liar and a crook. And for these reasons, I'm going to say that because I'm not burdened by those personal ties. And I think that's a real tension, though, is to have a relationship with someone who gives you information that is valuable to you without getting so close that you're not able to do your job and hold that person accountable. But Tucker Carlson, does know how to play the media like a fiddle. And I don't think that some of these reporters have figured that out. Yeah. But I do think that once
it's like the old Javanka, remember that old shtick?
Oh,
where
so
every
obvious,
time something went down, it was like, well, Jared and Ivanka were upset about that. It's just like, it's too much to bear. Okay, like people they had to change their practices, and they really didn't. And I know, and I don't think that they've really. I think that they did. I'll give reporters this. They did a much better job handling the sort of Russia kind of like hacked materials. Like I was very worried that they didn't learn about that from 2020 and dealing with all of the trolls and all that stuff, not elevating all of that. I think that there was, definitely some lessons learned in the disinformation space. But not much changed when it came to the kind of this town, Mark Leibovich, sort of Washington elbow greasing that was, problematic, but understandable in the Clinton and Bush eras, and really not working in the Trump era at all.
Okay, so let's switch gears here a little bit. This is a BFD, the Supreme Court ruling on the NCAA. It was a unanimous ruling that the NCAA cannot bar these modest payments to student athletes. In a decision, this is the New York Times, that questioned the association's monopoly power at a time when the business model of college sports is under increasing pressure. And like a lot of other folks, I found Brett Kavanaugh's concurrence to be the most interesting part of this, because he held nothing back, pure fire directed at the NCAA, certainly signaling that if somebody brought an antitrust action against the NCAA, the court would be more than willing to entertain it. I mean, I love this. He says the bottom line is the NCAA and its member colleges suppressing the pay of student athletes who collectively generate billions of dollars in revenues for colleges every year. Those enormous sums of money flow to seemingly everyone except the student athletes. It goes on. And a little bit later, nowhere else in America can businesses get away with agreeing not to pay their workers a fair market share on the theory that their product is defined by not paying their workers a fair market rate. And under ordinary principles of antitrust law, here it is not evident why college sports should be any different. The NCAA is not above the law. Brett Kavanaugh with a loaded gun aimed right at the NCAA.
Hey, Brett Kavanaugh did something we like. Love to hear that, and I think it was important coming from Kavanaugh, because here's the thing. And I'm sure this is not exactly an issue that divides clearly along partisan lines, but just because I've been a long time advocate for student pay. It's been one of my hobby horses for years. In Republican circles, I'll just say, I always would get aggressive pushback from guys like Brett Kavanaugh, right? From your sort of country club Republican, I like beer types of guys. They would always go into the whole shtick about how, oh, well, they're getting this education and it's the tradition and blah, blah, blah. And, I always would push back and say, like, I don't, there's nothing free market. You're supposed to be the free market party. We're supposed to be the party that supports the market. Well, there's nothing that says free market like supplying institutional housing to underage laborers, right? And giving them a little food plan and saying, congrats, like that's your compensation. That is Eastern Bloc type behavior. And it's been clear that it's been a cartel for a long time. I think that everyone, there are going to be unintended consequences of this. It could have a negative impact on college sports. We don't know yet. I'm skeptical of that. There's a lot of deep community and tradition when it comes to college sports that I don't think is going to be impacted, because these guys can get some modest stipends and women. And then these guys can get paid for their now image and likeness. There was I think what originally radicalized me about this is I was reading a book about the Fab Five. Remember the Fab Five? They're Michigan. They were all freshmen, and they were the ones that started wearing baggy shorts. And so they were when I was coming of age, they were the cool college team. And, Chris Webber would talk about how he would like walk by the student store and like there would be his jersey up for sale. And he's like, why am I not, meanwhile, he's like, scrounging around for some coins to like get to eat chicken nuggets, and it's like, this is crazy. And so, I'm happy that Kavanaugh made the change. We don't exactly know how everything's going to shake out, but I really think that it's going to be sustainable. Now, there could be some downstream negative impacts. When people say, well, these guys fund the rowing team or whatever. Now is there going to be enough money for the rowing team? And I guess my answer to that is I don't know. Like, isn't it up to the school to figure that out? Like, maybe instead of taking the money from the rowing team, the all of the administrative bloat that has grown in all these colleges could maybe be pared back. And do we need, multiple different, assistant school presidents, and, can't we assistant athletic directors, and can't we cut down on that? I also think it'll bring more money in right now because they can do commercials and advertising. So, this is why I like that Kavanaugh's on it, the free market argument. There's not like this limited pie that says that, now that student athletes come in, it's got to come from the rowing team. Maybe the pie can grow right now that the athletes, could start to do commercials for themselves. And that's just additive into what was already coming in. So I think it's good. Obviously, it was disproportionately hurting Black and brown kids that are on these teams. It always made me feel gross, to go down there and know that a lot of these young men and increasingly women, the women's basketball players are super popular on social media, and I think are going to be able to advertise themselves and make money as well. So it's just it's a good decision, 9-0. It's nice that it wasn't partisan. And we'll kind of see exactly what the ramifications are.
No, and it will be a dramatic change. And you're right, that in order to embrace the change, you don't have to understand every possible consequence of it. But I thought what was interesting about this decision is the way that it exposed how weak the NCAA argument was.
Yeah.
That essentially they stood before the court and they said, we need to be allowed to continue doing it this way because we have always done it this way. This is the tradition. And as the court said, you need to have something a little bit better than, this is the way we've always done things. That there are traditions that are good, and then there are traditions that have outlived their usefulness. And from a conservative point of view, we like tradition, right? But we also like free market, and they're in real conflict with one another. There's real tension. And so what exactly is the tradition, this tradition which has morphed into the vast exploitation of these young people, many of them Black and brown, that has generated massive profits for other people that they are not allowed to touch. So, that's the kind of, it was one of those moments in that 9-0 decision, I think, essentially demonstrated that the position of the NCAA, of the traditionalists, is simply not sustainable anymore. That people are going to look back on it and they'll go, can you imagine that they argued that as late as 2021? Yeah. And nobody was buying it anymore.
Yeah, I had someone send me an article of one of my Twitter followers that he had written in 1989, basically making the Kavanaugh argument, right? Like this has been clear for a long time now, and it shows, even if an argument is weak, like when you have anti-market forces, when you have a cartel, not to overstate this, but when you have the despotic attitudes of a Hungary and a Poland, right? Like when you're able to put the clamps down on people, you can keep it going for a long time, right? Like even if it's clear that that abuse is happening, and because this has been clear for a long time. And the other thing when you talk about the exploitation, and as I was mentioning earlier about where the other funds can come from, last year, so I'm an LSU fan. LSU just completely revamped their locker rooms, and if you go the LSU locker room facilities right now, it's like the nicest place on the planet. It is futuristic with the flat screen TVs and the lay down beds and couches, and it's there's a lot of money that is being redirected into other places that sometimes when people are like, oh, the unintended consequence is always going to be bad, and the people that other people are going to suffer, and it's maybe, well, no, maybe schools will just start to kind of dial back some of the excesses too.
No, you're right. It's just sort of the inertia of the status quo sometimes, that that when that when you actually say, okay, make an articulate, logical, legally coherent argument for it, go, yeah, I don't really have it. It's just kind of been around. It's like, it's why you haven't changed your furniture.
Yeah, exactly. But the argument they always make, and just to defend it, is that, well, they're getting the education. they're getting the education. And while surely education is valuable, the main issues with that is, number one, they had March Madness. I don't know if you noticed, like, it takes place on Thursday and Friday and Monday. It's like these guys are getting paid. These guys are not getting paid and being forced to travel outside of school for these games on weekdays, right? So it's like, if you want to do the student athlete thing, then you have to go all in on that, right? Then the games have to be on weekends, and you got to make sure that they have time to go to their classes, and like that, it just isn't what was happening, right? And this notion that, okay, well, they got the education, so that means that they should be denied all of the value that they're providing over and beyond that education. Because let me tell you, the players in the LSU football team are providing a lot more financial value to Louisiana State University than the value of a Louisiana State University education, which is a great education. It's good, nothing against it, but trust me, it's more. Their value is more, right? So that that's like saying, hey, Charlie, instead of compensating you for this podcast, right? Like, we're going to give you, would you like to get a master's degree? It's like, I don't know. I'll take both, actually. I don't know. Yeah.
I would just like one of the Bulwark onesies for my granddaughter. I mean, that's all I want. That's all the compensation I want. Apparently, we're sending them out to our contributors and everything. And on Slack, I said, hey, I have kids too. And it's like, I can't get the onesie. So I don't know. That's all I want. Who do I talk to? I
don't know. There's nobody at home, Charlie. There's nobody home. I think you just got to fly to DC and bang down the door yourself to get the onesie. I don't know. The airline ticket.
So we managed to get through this entire thing without talking about the filibuster, without talking about Kyrsten Sinema or Joe Manchin, or the fact that the Democrats are going to have the voting rights bill up on for a vote, and it will be defeated. It's sort of interesting. Kind of an interesting moment where everyone knows exactly what's going to happen. They're going to put the voting rights bill, this is H.R. 1S, which everybody knows is not going anywhere. It will come up for a vote, and it will lose. And I guess the point is what? Is to show Joe Manchin and others that Republicans can't be dealt with, that there's no compromise whatsoever, and therefore to try to build more support for modifying the filibuster. Well, that's got to be the only thing I can think of, right?
I think that the interest groups, I think that the Democratic leadership in the Senate is scared of their own supporters, of their own activists, rather, and need to feel like that they put it up. And I can't think of any other reason to do it, because you're creating a challenging vote, I guess, for some of the other, my understanding is there's some Democratic senators who don't really love this bill as is, right? But are going to be forced to vote for it because they know it's a loser anyway. I don't know. I was encouraged. The most encouraging thing I've seen from the Democrats on this is the change on the voter ID provision.
Oh my God!
So I think that is a sign, hopefully, that they are moving out of wish casting mode and into what can we pass that will fix some of the problems with our democracy and that is popular, because those are the two biggest things that matter, like whether it actually fixes the problem and whether it's popular, and hopefully they can balance those two now once we move forward from this.
So just one last word on this, because a lot of people seem to be surprised by the fact that people overwhelmingly support voter IDs. I'm guessing that you have known this for many, many years. I have known this, and this is a point. This is not a mountain to die on. Voter IDs are not that. They shouldn't be that controversial. But here's the Monmouth poll that came out yesterday. In general, do you support or oppose requiring voters to show a photo ID in order to vote? Overall, get this: 80% supported. Includes 91% of Republicans, 87% of independents, and wait for it, 62% of Democrats. 77% of white voters support it. 84% of non-white voters support a photo ID, mainly because people know, gosh, you need to show a photo ID for just about everything. This doesn't seem to be unreasonable. So I do think it was positive when people like Stacey Abrams said, hey, okay, if Joe Manchin is proposing that as a compromise, that is not a deal killer. that just struck me as kind of a reality check for folks who have been, and again, if this comes as a surprise to any of our progressive listeners, it might be an indication that you've been in your own a little bit of an echo chamber, because you step out into the real world and you realize that voter IDs have broad support and really are regarded as kind of just a common sense election security measure. So.
I've got nothing to add to that, Charlie. I mean,
all right.
And it's all, I mean, well, it's the I guess the thing I just have to add is just going back to the point is that when you have numbers like that, you have to incorporate into all of this, into the Democratic mindset that if this is as big of an existential threat as they believe and as we believe, right? Then you have to act as such. And acting as such means focusing on the things you need to get done in order to fix it. And by the way, putting yourself in the best possible position to win in 2022 and 2024 and not, cutting off your nose despite your face. And so, being on the wrong side of 80-90% issues is, not helping.
Yeah, this is not a good time for just sort of the performative ideological purity here. You should get something done if it really is an existential threat. Tim Miller, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast. We always appreciate it.
Thanks, Charlie.
And thank you all for listening to today's Bulwark podcast. I'm Charlie Sykes. We will be back tomorrow, and we will do this all over again.